So I'm coming through loud and clear. Thank you guys. Hey, I was so looking forward to Wild Horse Canyon. And then, okay, it was another COVID thing. But once again, I thought, wow, we got a chance to talk with a whole lot more people now because we got no bus limits and other kinds of limits. So I'm really looking forward to the chat a little later. As Les said, love this to be as conversational as possible. I am excited here tonight, tomorrow night, and Saturday morning to just be exploring these values of respect, empathy, and inclusion. Really a lifesaver. I'm kind of a tool guy. I love Home Depot. Is this tool, this mindset of finding the good, a lifesaver that for me comes out of the story of Rwanda, my experiences in Rwanda. And I think it's something that's really awesome right now as we're dealing with COVID and a lot of other challenges. I know some of you there in Portland, more than 100 days of the demonstrations, and this is a supercharged time. And I am, if more than ever, loving this idea of finding the good. So we'll talk some more about that. But our tagline this weekend is a quote from Bell Hooks. You might want to check her out. It's the choice to love is a choice to connect. The choice to love is a choice to connect, to find ourselves in the other. And this evening, we're going to jump into 3 stories that I hope will make that very much come to life. The choice to love, choice to connect, finding ourselves in the other. Whoa, I zoomed over the first one there. Unbelievable, 30 years ago. Yeah, Teresa and I moved to Rwanda, and some of you know this story. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it this evening, but just to set the stage with our kids there. In fact, some of you know our kids and from camp and stuff. We were in Rwanda for 4 years before this horrible thing called the genocide. The genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 happened. This picture was actually taken about a week before the plane is shot down and everything just explodes. My mom and dad were visiting. You know, what's really kind of fun about this picture is I am the age now that my dad was in 1994. And I look at this and I think, whew, what in the world was I thinking? What were Teresa and I thinking when we made the decision that I would stay? But jumped a little ahead on the story there. That first night, April 6, 1994, when the plane is shot down and the planners of the genocide launched this campaign to kill the Tutsi people, bullets were flying around our neighborhood. You know, as many times as I've told this story, I still just, it can, you know, in my memory, I can just go right back there, moving the kids into the hallway. We actually put the TV in the hallway with the old VCR, and I think we were probably playing some Sesame Street tapes and just trying to make this more like an adventure than an ordeal. We're going to leave our house. That's Wednesday night. The plane is shot down. We're going to jump ahead to Saturday, April 9. Boom, out of the blue, about 1,000 soldiers show up at the airport from France, from Belgium. These are the top line in the military. They've not come to help or stop the genocide. They've come to evacuate all of the foreigners. And, you know, they're not taking orders from all the UN soldiers who were there and stuff. They're taking orders from their government to evacuate, and not just French or Belgian, any foreigners, but they won't touch anybody who's Rwandan. In one of these evacuation missions, journalists joined in with them. We're actually going to meet Caitlin Hermans, a Belgian TV journalist who was embedded with the reporters. Now understand, these journalists, this is like a year before internet goes public in 95 and news starts getting on internet and stuff. So this is still television, radio, journalism, newspapers, you know, Time Magazine, all of those things. Caitlin is there covering this story, and we're going to see just where it takes her in a moment. They will drive through the countryside to this mental hospital. They'll drive by a roadblock, hardly a roadblock, a log across the road, ordinary men and women, farmers, really, who have been listening to a radio that's been telling them the Tutsi are the enemy, the Tutsi are the enemy. And yet when they see foreigners in uniform, boom, they just back off. They buzz past this evacuation team, buzzes past this roadblock. They get to the hospital. Now, before I get there, I'm not going to go into a lot of history this evening about the genocide, but I do want to just make this point super clear, because it wasn't just relevant then, it's relevant today. The Rwanda genocide is not the story of one group fighting another group, Hutu majority fighting Tutsi minority. No, this is a story of political manipulation of basic ordinary people's needs. Okay, this is a story of political manipulation. It is not of hate. In fact, the Hutu and Tutsi people, they loved each other more than they hated each other. So the planners of this genocide are going to have to work hard to break the bonds. And tragically, they're enormously successful. Tutsi people think, okay, nobody will come to my house. Maybe if I can get, like in this case, to the mental hospital, there's some foreigners there. Somebody will come and help, I know, with the foreigners who are there. And as they pull in the gates, you see the actual footage. In fact, I'll show you a clip in a moment. People pouring out of the hospital. Yay, we're being rescued, they think. And they go up, this man speaking in French to the soldier, because French was the second language in Rwanda, Kinyarwanda, French. Yeah, we've been here for 3 days. We're down in the basement. There's bodies. And man, we're so glad you're here. But soon they get the idea that no, the soldiers aren't there for them. They're there to evacuate the expatriates. So the people turn, these are sharp people, huh? They turn to the journalist. Maybe the journalist, okay, and they start laughing and clapping like, yeah, we're being rescued, but they're not. It's about a minute here. This is from a documentary called Ghost of Rwanda. It's actually available on YouTube.
It was a whole group of people, but in the whole group, one woman started to speak and started to explain why they were afraid and what was happening to them. And she started begging us to take her and the others with us. She was speaking to me, a woman to a woman, saying, I'm afraid, please help me. And we were just listening to her, and then we couldn't do anything. At that moment, we thought we couldn't do anything, just listen and say this. So we left. For the white people, it's over. Between you, the hundreds that stay. And we heard the shooting at the moment we left, so it was clear for me that hell starts for them.
All Western troops and UN peacekeepers were under orders not to evacuate ordinary Rwandans.
I actually went online. Did you notice the pause there when she was saying, you know, we couldn't do anything? And then she pauses and she says, at the moment, we thought we couldn't do it. I'm sure hundreds and hundreds of times it's played over her mind, in her mind, what could we do? I actually went online today looking for a little more testimony, I couldn't find much about her on the internet, but I did find one interview where she talked about this, and she added a really important part. You probably heard this as the lady is begging with her. She was speaking to me woman to woman, saying, I'm afraid. There are those men, and she's pointing over there. I'm afraid that they will rape me. It's really interesting because some of the Rwandan ladies have, they've told me and others, we weren't afraid of dying. It's what they would do to us before. And here's the real part that just jumped out, and I wanted to put it on the screen for you, because Caitlin says, it was hard to say, I cannot help you. I was not talking to hundreds of people. I was talking to one woman. And that's very hard to say. The choice to love is a choice to connect and to see ourselves in the other. And there's no question in my mind that as that woman was talking to Caitlin, she saw herself. We're going to zip back to our house just a few miles away. And we've not yet left. In our home, Friday night, Teresa and I are going to go in the bedroom, and we got a decision we got to make. This young lady had lived and worked in our home. This is actually a picture. She didn't usually cook pancakes on a charcoal burner. This is a picture actually during the genocide. But this young lady had lived and worked in our home for like, probably 3 years, loved on our kids. I mean, you know, Sean might do something a little bit naughty and she'd go, oh, Sean, you know, she's like this doting aunt, or sometimes she might even join in with the kids in their antics of a little prank or something like that. But her ID card said Tootsie, which marked her to be killed. And as Teresa and I went in the bedroom, we were thinking not only about her, but there was also the young man who came in the evening as the watchman. We're in the bedroom, we're talking, we're praying, we're forehead to forehead. And there's just really no way we can leave these two people in our house, because we're 100% sure that if we leave them, at least 99, how can you be 100, but 99% sure if we leave them, they'll be killed. And so Teresa and I make the decision, okay, she's going to take the kids to safety and I'll stay and hopefully help these two people. It was one thing to communicate that to my dad, which was a really tough conversation, as you might imagine. But then I'm on the radio and I'm talking to Laura Lane. She was probably like 26 at this time. Young Foreign Service officer. I think her first posting was Bolivia and now Rwanda. And it's her job to get all the Americans out safely. So I'm talking on the radio to her. We had radio networks around the place because telephones had gone out. And we use radios for our work in the country anyway. And I'm like, let's see if I remember right. Laura, the people at the dental compound have just signed off and they're on their way to the ambassador's home. Over. And she goes, good copy, over. And I said, I'm sending Teresa and the kids, my folks, to the ambassador's compound now also, over. And she comes back and says, what do you mean you're sending them? We're all leaving. And I go, no, I'm not leaving. She says, you don't have a choice. And, you know, of course, I forgot the over and all that stuff. You don't have a choice. And I said, yeah, Laura, as a private American citizen, I do have a choice. And you could hear her, she's, you know, doing these mental gymnastics. And she's like, okay, then I need you to sign on a piece of paper that you have refused the help of the American government to leave Rwanda. And so I wrote out, I remember with a pencil on one of Mindy's little notebook, I found an empty page, spiral bound notebook. I refuse the help of the American government to leave Rwanda. And I folded that up, gave it to Teresa. Kind of a small little, maybe symbolic thing. But as I look back on it, it really was letting go of the things that we often would look to for security, and beginning to trust individuals. And when I say trusting God, this would be fun. If you want to get into this in the Q&A, I would love to talk about this idea of God and genocide being all powerful and all loving, and what's going on here. Please, love to explore that further. But to finish this second story with you here, Teresa and the kids will climb in. I built a little camper on the back of our pickup truck. She and my mom, a young lady from the former Yugoslavia, will all crawl in the back. Dad will be the driver. Dad will be the one. The curtains will be drawn. The kids won't see the bodies. Dad will see the trucks loaded with families who have already been killed, and their corpses being taken to mass graves. We don't talk about that a lot, but I've always been bound to my dad. And if you want to talk about an example of to love is to connect, you need to know my dad, because he's a master at that. And he drove the family out to safety. And I stayed. And if you'd like to learn a little more, oh, I almost forget, that's why I stuck the picture in. The young lady did survive with her handsome sons, her husband. This is a picture a couple years ago. And the young man survived too. And if you'd like to learn a little more, as Les had mentioned, you can upload. We just put this on 16 views. It's viral. We actually just put it on the other day on YouTube. You're welcome to just dial in there. I'm not leaving full movie, and you can learn more of that story. The third story I wanted to get to you with this evening is my friend Gasikwa. Gasikwa, still living, a wonderful friend. He was a co-worker with ADRA. We were building schools together and doing stuff like that. Gasikwa's a man of integrity. I could tell you stories. In fact, ask me more about Gasikwa in the Q&A too. I'd love to tell you more stories about this man and his integrity. But Gasikwa, because of that integrity, people were flocking to his home. He had a Hutu ID card, so he wasn't marked to be killed. But as soon as he started being kind and taking refuge Tutsis, then he was marked to be killed. And he had more than 40 people in his home. Even the local government guy who was in a similar situation to Gasikwa, in that, I didn't tell you his whole story, he had a Hutu ID card, but his wife had a Tutsi ID card. It's like I said, the people, the Hutu and Tutsi, they married each other all the time. Local government guy comes to Gasikwa and says, I don't think I can protect my wife and kids. Will you try? I mean, you know, I was staying hoping that I could use the enormous privilege that Rwandans gave foreigners, this incredible gift of privilege. And that'd be fun to talk about too in the Q&A, is privilege, some that is just we're born with, and other privilege that we earn. Anyway, I was hoping to use that privilege to help protect people in my home. Gasikwa didn't have that foreigner privilege, didn't have a gun. He's not a government guy. In fact, the government guy is asking him, can you protect my wife and children? And when a couple of neighbors come to his house, this is a little sketch from that film, I'm Not Leaving. When a couple of neighbors come to his house intent on killing the people in his home, Gasikwa comes out with a couple of chickens. And he says, I don't know, I'll call the guy Bernard, one of his neighbors. Bernard, your daughters must be hungry. Hey, would you like some chickens? I mean, Gasikwa doesn't come out fighting. Gasikwa comes out loving, connected, a choice to love, a choice to connect, seeing yourself in the other. Your daughters must be hungry. And perhaps Bernard's daughters, maybe he was put in the bed the other night and they were crying and their dad, I can't sleep, I'm hungry. And he's like, maybe tomorrow, babe. And I look at this and I see the enemy. Gasikwa looks and he sees neighbors. I see these clubs and stuff with those spikes, brutal weapons. I see killers. Gasikwa sees fathers. And these men leave with chickens in their hand instead of the blood of innocent people on their hands. This idea of the choice to love is a choice to connect. It's all around us. And for me, the greatest connection, of course, is with God. It's with my maker. So I wanted to wrap up before our Q&A just to share something. I don't know. I haven't done this for years, and I've probably only done it 3 or 4 times before. Back maybe when I was, probably when I was at Milo and maybe at other Bible. In fact, I think I did do this at Big Lake probably 15 years ago. I've been journaling since 1998. I can't believe it. I hated writing when I was in high school, like many of you guys hated writing. Oh, 5-page paper, are you kidding me? Now I love, we're gonna just jump into my journal here. Every morning, let's see, is that able? Yeah, you can sort of see some of this. Every morning when I open this Word document in Pages on my iPad, it's like walking through a garden of memories and monuments. You know, one morning when I was journaling, I color the words, and I arrange them. And this one, I was just thinking with the Father, by your grace, by your breath, by our heartbeat, his heart beating in my heart, through our eyes. I love night walks, going out at nighttime and such. In fact, lately, I've been sleeping on the roof of the carport under the stars. The weather's been gorgeous. And every time I sleep outside, I'm like, why don't I do this all the time? Anyway, I won't stop in all the stuff that I go through as I do every morning in my journal. Let me stop here for a sec. Just be with me. Just breathe with me. Just believe with me. There's this companionship, there's this connection that I can't imagine this depth without journaling. I mean, I pray and I sing and I read and stuff, but each morning to sit down and start writing, there's a lot of stuff in here too about social justice and stuff. My journal is a very practical place for me. The good stuff out of, the core values out of Galatians: love, joy, peace, affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity, a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in my heart. All of this stuff is like walking through the garden till I get to the point where I'm going to start typing again. Hey, some good stuff about marriage, how positive. I will constantly, this is a commitment to my wife, I will constantly be on the lookout for the good in you. Grateful. I will be counting my blessings from God in you, while at the same time be working towards an expectant, free, I hope you can read this, environment in our relationship. I will be an encourager in words and actions, while at the same time working towards a judgment-free zone in our relationship. And this morning, the mood meter, emotional intelligence, a lot of fun stuff here. But as I get through walking through all of those things, I get down to where I start writing. This morning, where do we? Yeah, here, September 24. Soon as I start typing, good morning, Papa. I'm transported to this other place. And sometimes, like this morning, I pasted in a text I got from a friend. We've been talking about this book, Educated. Man, if you haven't read that book, it's a powerful, powerful book, Educated. And the friend was writing back, about Tara Westover, the author, her honesty and thoughtfulness regarding the idea of truth in her narrative is honestly what I love most about the book. And while I'm not going to get into the book, and she goes on, my friend, it connects with the idea of restorative justice. Everybody needs a voice. We weight every voice equally, everybody's voice. I mean, it's really hard for me, especially with Rwanda, to not weight the survivors' voices heavier or more valuable than the perpetrators' voices. But that's not the pathway to restorative justice. And so she got me going on this idea of truth. And I got to thinking about, Jesus. He's saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so often, this is another thing that I do. This idea of replacing judgment, curiosity. There's a lot of stuff we could dig into if you want in the Q&A. But I went and, in fact, this is a great podcast, Malcolm Gladwell, and it's called Free Brian Williams. It's how we so often, when somebody tells a story differently, they have a different memory than I do, we jump to the conclusion, somebody must be lying here or something like that. Excellent podcast, just a little podcast advertisement there. But I went and I cut and pasted from my Bible app, John 14, 1-7. And when you paste stuff in, it's just kind of paragraphs in that for me. Years ago, I started centering it and then coloring it. And I'm not going to show you that right now. I'm going to show you what actually I did this morning. I changed it to red, and I started centering phrases. Jesus is talking here. I mean, he's talking to me, but he's also talking to Peter. Don't let this throw you. And I'm like, what? Like COVID? Don't let this throw you. You trust God, don't you? Trust me. There's plenty of room for you in my Father's home. If it weren't so, would I have told you that I'm on my way to get a room ready for you? And if I'm on my way to get a room ready, I'll come back. I'll get you so you can live where I live. And you already know the road I'm talking, the road I'm taking. And Thomas is like, Master, wait a minute. We don't have an idea where you're going. How do you expect us to know the road? And Jesus says, I'm the road. I'm also the truth. I'm the life. No one gets to the Father apart from me. If you really knew me, you'd know my Father. You see, a choice to love is a choice to connect. And from now on, you do know him. You've seen him because you've seen me. And then I'll go back, and I'm not going to do this right now for you, but I'll go back because I erased it because I thought I'd maybe take the time. But okay, I'm going to just show you one thing. Like come back here. I go back and I start writing in the middle of this. Don't let this throw you. And so I'll change colors because I don't want to write in red. Those are Jesus's words there in John. So I'll change colors and I'll go, when it says, don't let this throw you, I'll be like, like I just said to you? You mean COVID? Or you mean I can't go to Wild Horse Canyon? You know, I just start writing to the Father in the middle of Scripture, and it's just been so good, you guys. This is like one of my most favorite things to do. Oh, we didn't get into brain stuff. Ask me about brain stuff in Q&A because that's really exciting. But these are just a few pages out of my journal. I put this was back in January, an autistic Russian teenager amazing the art world. You see, finding the good is about looking for it and then documenting it, putting it in my journal. I often put stuff, true, noble, reputable, authentic. That's our little dog bookcasing this little quote here. Didn't get the little dog on there, did I? Yeah, there we go. So I'm gonna hand it back to you, Ben, Les, team here, and Melissa. Looking forward to some conversation.
Absolutely. And Carl, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm really glad we get to dig into this a bit more. I'm going to start by bringing a little bit of joy to at least 4 people. We got some t-shirt winners. So the following 4 people have won t-shirts. Caitlin Nelson from CAA, Ellie Renee from PAA, Emily Mitchell from Sheldon High School, and Daniel Thornton from Livingston. Congratulations on some t-shirt wins, guys.
Nice. Nice. Congratulations. And Carl, thank you for that message. And there are a number of pieces that really jumped out at me. But before I want to give a shout out to a couple of those thoughts real quick, but I want to introduce, we have a number of students, 3 to be exact tonight, that have joined us that are going to be sharing some questions, comments from the chat. If you want to add more of questions or comments, feel free to just jump on that YouTube channel and put some comments down there below it. And if we have time, we might get to those, and would love to keep that dialogue going, even if it's just within the comment section itself. So I want to introduce, let's see, what do we have? We have Brenna, Abby, and Josue. And so thank you very much for joining us. And as they get ready, I will hand it to Brenna first off. But before I do, Carl, the part that jumped out at me was that word enough. And I've just been mulling this over all week. The idea of scarcity is what makes us so competitive. And I as I read the story and hear the story that you told tonight, the idea that the haves and the have-nots and the feeling like I'm being left out, and if I can just get rid of those people, the other and the othering that we do in our society, and right now the political craziness that's going on, and it's just this rhetoric of like, if you just got rid of the other side, we'd have enough for us.
Yeah.
And I just, that passage, you know, he's like, there's plenty of room. There's more than enough. The earth is abundant for all of you.
Absolutely.
Stop, just stop and love each other, and life will be so much better. That really hit me. That really hit me tonight.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I love the word portion, and I think about, you are my portion, Father. Oh. And there's that abundance, more than I could ever imagine. And that those once I start firing those pathways of abundance and gratitude, then I see more and I see more. But then when I fire pathways of scarcity and of we're under attack kind of pathways, then I'm firing, and I see it more and more too. It's crazy. I used to be a believer that, seeing is believing, show me, and then I'll believe it. Now I'm more like, I think I see what I believe a lot more than I believe what I see.
Wow, that's so true. That's so true. That's good. Well put. Well put. Hey, Brenna, if you're on, I'm going to hand it over to you and see if you would key up a question or comment that you have from tonight, and then we'll pass it on over to Abby and Josue.
Okay. I had a question. In what ways was God directing you to stay in Rwanda? So like, what was that decision-making process and like, what did it look like?
Thanks. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Brenna. Hey, you know what? I have a deal because I get a chance to talk to students all the time. Before I answer questions, I get to always ask one question, which is, what do you love doing, Brenna? What do you love doing?
I love playing sports.
Nice.
Yeah.
And in particular?
Basketball.
Oh, cool, cool, cool. All right, Brenna, basketball. It's funny, I remember that better than names. But anyway, yeah, God and this decision to stay. We could talk a long time on that, but I'm going to just pick a couple of things. Teresa and I, when we were back there in the bedroom talking and praying, didn't hear any voices. But you know what? We did have this enormous sense of peace. This is the right thing to do. Now, that's really hard to nail down at times and say, because I don't know, because feelings can be really manipulative and feelings can be really squishy and hard to figure out. But that one about peace, I'm still, even though their feelings are a wild thing, they're also like a wonderful power to harness. But that peace was definitely part of it. We both had that peace. Interestingly, when I went and talked to my dad, right away, he didn't have that peace. And I understand that as a dad. You know, he had many other pathways firing in his brain and looking at his grandkids. And to many people, it looked like certain death because it was so horrible at that time. But that peace that not only me, but Teresa, if Teresa was here, she would tell you, she'd say like, I'm not an especially brave person, although I think she really is. But she says, I got that peace. But the other part of this is I've looked back and I think this whole idea that I didn't get into earlier, and I won't get into too much detail now unless somebody wants to get into neural pathways and synapses and all that good stuff, is as a little kid, I read stories and like many of you, David and Goliath, Esther for such a time as this, Joseph and that, all of those stories had impacts. And I loved reading. I love reading stories about World War II and people who were rescuing Jewish people and the, the Underground Railroad here in America, the civil rights movement. I loved reading about this guy who he shaved his hair off, a white guy, shaved his hair off and stained his skin and went down south in the 60s in America to see what it was like to be a person of color. The book's called Black Like Me. All of those books that I read, I'm sure they imprinted in my mind the idea that this is possible. I can do something. And somebody could say, well, wait, I just asked, what did God do? That's what God does, I think. When I choose what books I'm going to read, when I choose, movies I'm watching, and I choose conversations and stuff, I'm imprinting things in my brain that are, like talking with Les a bit ago, perhaps, helicopter out there, sorry, it'll be gone in a minute. Perhaps if I'm firing those pathways of scarcity and there's not enough, I don't think that's of God. But I read those other stories where we put other people ahead of ourselves, and that boom adjustment in my brain, because I think it is easy to be born selfish, and boom, another when I was a little kid, I was just talking to Dad about this the other day, like maybe 6 years old, 7 years old. We had a neighbor who he'd get drunk and he'd beat his wife and she'd run to our house for safety. And I said, you know what, Dad? I remember at night hearing crying in the kitchen. And, this little 6-year-old boy in his jammies comes out, what's going on? And Mom says, it's okay, Carl, go back to bed, but the neighbor's wife was crying in the kitchen. Our house was a safe place. That was God working in my life. And the stories can go on and on that we often think, oh, God's going to speak to us. And maybe sometimes he does, or I'll open my Bible and I'll point to a scripture or something, maybe sometimes. But I think it's a constant journey, and it's constant choices that we keep making in our life. Little things. Thank you to the guy cleaning the bathroom at the airport, little thank you, Taco Bell guy, you're feeding hundreds of people today. Those little choices, I think, God's working through those little choices. And to when we come to the big choices, God's like, hey, you remember when you were in Zimbabwe? Yeah. Oh yeah, that experience there. Yeah, this is similar. And so I definitely think that those other choices, and then the support of Teresa. If Teresa would have said, hey, what about me and the kids? And if she would have said, aren't we important? If she would have said, like, here's us and here's them, I don't know what I would have done, but that's not how she rolls. And she wasn't like, what about me and the kids? That would have been really normal and natural. But she was like, no, this is our family, which is why I really, love that picture, that sketch there of oh wait, I was already in the picture section here. That sketch of our family together with the other two people. Thanks. And then a little voice just said in my head, make your answer shorter. But thanks for your question.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you, basketball girl.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
All right, I think I had the next question. So first of all, to answer your
Abby, wait. Yeah, you know what I'm going to ask, Abby? What do you love doing?
Oh man, that's hard.
I know,
I
there's a
narrowed it
bunch
down
of
to,
things.
I've been thinking this whole time and I narrowed it down to two things. I
Okay.
really love to read and I also like doing art.
Nice, nice. These sketches, if you get a chance to see that film, we are so excited with the artist who helped us in doing that film. Cool. I love reading too. Okay, what do you want to explore?
All right, so you mentioned privilege and I was just wondering like what that looked like down there and kind of how far that privilege extended.
Yeah. And that's a real buzzword these days. And I was talking about privilege before it was a buzzword, but these days it's become this buzzword. And I think it's really important to recognize, as I just barely started to touch on before, that there's some privilege that we just get where we're born. We don't get to choose, for example, that I'm born in a economically deprived part of a city in India, or I'm born in the beautiful Northwest and to a family who is well off financially. There's a lot of things we don't get to choose in there. Those are the privileges of birth and choice. And it's not all about race. And unfortunately, people have narrowed down privilege to be just simply, but which is important to examine, absolutely. But in Rwanda, they gave us as foreigners just this wonderful welcome. Your guest in our country, they give you the best that they had. The other side of privilege to me was, well, check this out. Our kids for 4 years were playing around the neighborhood with neighborhood kids, running in and out of homes, going to funerals, eating I don't know what food. And Sean was always barely just had on a pair of shorts. And, he's got these, always had scratches and scrapes on his legs and stuff. But for 4 years, they were building relationships. The second night of the genocide, when a gang came to our house with, I found out later, the intent to kill us, neighbor ladies stood in front of the gate and they were armed with stories. They said, no, you can't go in that house. They said their kids play with our kids. Wow, that was a privilege to have those ladies stand up for us. That was a privilege that our kids had earned, actually, in running around and building relationships there. So this idea of privilege is often being a gift and often being earned. I really like exploring that more. And the other thing I'll say about privilege is that sometimes we think if we admit that we have privilege, that's like giving up your place at the table because, oh, you have privilege. So what you say, we're kind of going to discount that. And no, that's not true. Recognizing privilege helps us to be able to first work for equality, but also particularly with earned privilege, like a university degree, use that then to help others. But if we never acknowledge that we have those gifts, privilege, then we won't be nearly as intentional to use it. And in that case, it often worked. It wasn't 100%, but as a foreigner, that privilege let me do a lot of things that other people couldn't have done. But that doesn't mean they didn't. Like my friend Gasikwa, his integrity is what I would call his earned privilege. And he used that to protect the people in his house. So Thanks for that question. Does that make sense, or did you have a little more?
No, that
Okay.
was perfect.
All right. Nice to meet you. Reader and artist.
Hey, Carl.
Hey, nice to meet you. I don't see a name on my Zoom.
My name's Josue.
Josue, nice to meet you,
Yeah.
Josue. What do you love doing?
I love music.
Ah, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What do you want to explore?
So something that I've always struggled with is this concept of love, right? And we look at what Jesus says about it, and he talks about the Pharisees and how even the Pharisees loved those who loved them, right? So in life, it's really easy to love those who love you back. But how do we love those who are hard to love? How do we love those who hate you? How do we love those who want to exterminate your whole people, your whole culture? Like, I don't know, I see it especially in our political landscape, but not even that,
Absolutely.
just in general, you know,
Yeah.
it's really difficult to love those who are hard to love and wish bad for us. So how do we do that? Yeah.
I love it, Josue. Thank you. We just dove in the deep end, and I appreciate that big time. The first thing that comes to my mind is it's really hard to love anybody if I don't believe that I'm loved, that I'm valuable, and that I matter. And we as Christians have an enormous advantage because we get it from right at the beginning. Jesus loves me. This I know, you know? And yeah, the Bible tells me so, but even more impactful for a kid is, you know, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich or the other kinds of acts of kindness. And so when I can understand how much I'm loved and I start to live in that luxuriate, in that lavished love. I love, you know, in First John when he says, you know, the Father lavishes love on us. Then you start to see, wow, if I'm only a taker, this kind of, it wears out. It goes away mostly. It's like, I want more, I want more, I want more, I want more, and I'm insatiable. And then I start to discover at different points, whether a little kid or in teen years or even in later life for some people, the joy of giving, and the joy of giving without expecting anything in return. You see, that's a tough one because I think we grow up with this idea that, hey, well, I did that, so what are you going to do? And those are pathways in our brain. Really, I got to take a minute here since your question really deserves this and stuff. I was often wondering, you know, how do kind, generous people become murderers like they did in Rwanda? And we know you can't go back, but can they change? Can they ever be trusted again? And when I started learning about neural pathways and neuroplasticity and how, you know, whether it's timetables, 8 times 8 is 64 is stored away in one of those pathways there. And then the more we fire those pathways, they're coded with something, whether it's a basketball shoot or music, huh? And you start the chords, it just starts to come natural to you because this myelin sheath on the outside of the pathway becomes stronger and the thing just comes faster and faster. So with this idea of neuroplasticity, I can make a choice. For example, in Rwanda, and we won't get into it deep tonight, we'll get into it another maybe even tomorrow night. People who had done killing got a chance to reinvent themselves. Yeah, I was going to go there, but I won't. They got a chance to reinvent themselves in the community, to build roads and do things like that. So when you saw, okay, I am going to go for this little picture right here. When you saw somebody, oh no, tomorrow night I'll be on my regular computer. That's a long story. When you see somebody, we often just think one thing, huh? Like in Rwanda, they saw somebody who had killed, oh man, this one, I don't say this lightly, okay? But it's not unusual in Rwanda that they would see somebody who killed their family. Well, of course, what are you going to think? They killed my family. And I could say to myself, hey, there goes the guy who just got released from prison. That's the guy who killed my sister. Or the people in Rwanda have had the opportunity to, when I say reinvent themselves, do things together. Like they actually have worked together to build homes, and they have a chance to say, okay, yeah, he's the guy who killed my sister. I know this sounds ludicrous. As it's coming out of my mouth, this voice in my head is saying, are you kidding? You're going to try to do this in just a few seconds? But stick with me. That guy's a hard worker. He's strong. That's a tiny, tiny new pathway in my brain. That guy's a hard worker. He's strong. And another voice in my brain says, I don't care. Yeah, he's strong. And he killed a bunch more people. And I have a choice. Do I keep firing that pathway of the wrongs and the worst things, or do I look for the good? And another pathway in my brain is saying, no, not for those people. You don't look for the good. That's ridiculous. They've done the unpardonable. But I find that anger and bitterness just lives in me as long as I live in that world. They've done the unpardonable. So I take a risk and I start looking for the good in others who have maybe done the worst things, like I've seen in Rwanda. And for some people, they're like, you're twisted. And I have seen enough examples in my life, and I've done it enough in my own life. I'll share a picture where I've started an Instagram page for our time together here. And okay, I got to pay attention to my time here. You guys got more questions, I'm sure. We'll put some stuff up on this Instagram page. It's just called Respect, Empathy, Inclusion. It's brand new, so I got to post stuff on it tonight. But that idea, Josue, of looking for the good and starting to build new pathways, it doesn't erase the other pathways, and it shouldn't. But it helps the other pathways not dominate and control me. Because if all I see is the wrong and the harm that somebody has done, I might just have to go back to when they were little kids and think about what was it like when they were little kids. You ever been with a little kid who's learning to walk and you got your arms out and you're like, hey, come on, just another, oh, hey, everybody, look, he just took a step. Well, that is everybody's story at one point, unless they didn't have anybody encouraging them. They had nobody holding their hands out for them. And so this idea for me in the genocide, I had to back up at times and not look at them as they were today, as they were murdering people, but I had to try to visualize them as a little kid. And that was a new pathway in my brain. And like my friend Gasikwa, he didn't visualize them as enemy, he visualized them as fathers. So my choice to look for the good is a big part of a conversation that I think we're going to explore that more in the coming nights. Josue, thanks for that question, man. And I hope sometime maybe,
Thank you.
Put any music? Have you put any music on YouTube yourself?
No, not much. Not much.
Okay. I was just checking. Nice to meet you. Hey.
I want to give a special shout out first to a few of our schools who are doing watch parties right now. So special shout out to Cascade and Milo and Rogue with Brett, who are all doing big group watch parties, making it feel a little bit more like Bible camps. Excited you guys are joining us as a group, as a team. And Carl, you just touched a bit on Josue's question of how we love people who aren't loving us or who feel or seem unlovable. On the opposite side of that, how do the people who are the perpetrators in a situation like this, in a genocide, how do they live on with the guilt of what they've done?
Yeah, to me, it seems crushing at times because, and I so appreciate you asking that question. And actually, it took years for me to ever get to a place where I can even think about that. Because when you witness the horrors and you see all these things, it's so easy for that to just dominate my thinking. And then the day came, really, it was a friend of mine who survived, a 9-year-old. He was 9 at the time. And he said, it just blew my mind. He said, I've actually gotten to the point that I've thought, if I was a Hutu born into the home of the people who, he lost a bunch of family, mom and dad, brothers and sisters and stuff. If I was born in their home, I might have done the same thing they did. And I'm like, no, Emmanuel, don't say that. You wouldn't have ever done that. But Emmanuel was beginning to help me open up to the humanity, because while I can easily say those who killed dehumanize the others, I can dehumanize the people who killed so easily in my mind. I got plenty of evidence that to me justifies saying, you know, they gave up, they forfeited every right or everything. And that's the amazing thing. I mean, as it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, do you hear yourself? Because Jesus is the one who says, you never give up the right to my love and to my grace and to my thing. And so a lot of people in Rwanda will talk to you about their experience with God and getting free from that overwhelming burden. Others will say the journey started when I started to apologize and ask forgiveness. I started to see myself as a different person when I asked forgiveness. And one guy who we'll probably talk about tomorrow night, I haven't decided yet, tomorrow night, Sabbath morning, he came back to this lady again and again and again. And when I heard that first time, asking for her forgiveness, I was kind of mad. And I was like, okay, you asked once, that's enough. Leave her alone. Because I was still defining him by 1994. But that was part of his journey. And this lady, oh my goodness, Maria, yeah, we'll get into her story. She forgave him completely. And you know what she says? I don't mind saying this twice and 3 times and 4. She says, it's wonderful to be part of making somebody new. And that man has been made new, largely in part, I would say, to the forgiveness that he was given by the woman whose husband and sons he killed. And so, and you know what she would say? She's been given freedom from anger and bitterness, largely by his confession to her, and practically by telling her where her husband and sons are buried. So there's this emotional side of it, and there's a very practical side of that journey. So thanks for asking about that.
Carl, thank you so much. I'm just so moved as I sit here and listen, and I just think your message to us in this moment right now is so poignant, and it always is. But I want to just thank you and really just share my gratitude for what you've shared tonight and calling us back to that. And
well,
I'll just say this.
And I just wanted to say too, I just stuck my email up there. I always do that when I'm talking with people, because I know my answers are kind of long and there's people who had questions and didn't get to it. Feel free to shoot me an email and maybe we can address them tomorrow evening, or I'll shoot an email back. I'll have to make a bunch of YouTube videos with questions because I do want to continue the conversation. I'm really grateful, Les, for this opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely.